watching. Just a quick reminder that the flash drop sale is still available. Make sure you guys take advantage. Also got your email, so I'm going to put up the Get All 5 sale. As I said, when we get the books in, I will show you guys, and here it is, God to God right here. Book is in. We got a lot of books in, so we're going to make sure you guys who have pre-ordered, who have been waiting for books for a long time, and who have been patient with this process, we're going to get your books out first. But we appreciate the support and appreciate the patience on this. And here it is. As I said, we have it ready, and it's here. You can put the letters like the Godfather, as you can see. But a lot of people have been waiting on this book. There's a lot of doubters, a lot of naysayers, a lot of haters. As I said, it's a process, stuff happens, but here's the book, ready and available here now, getting the books together, and we're going to be getting them out. So we know who you are who have been waiting. Just stay patient, and we'll get an email. We know who everybody is. We'll make sure you get an email who ordered, and we'll make sure we get this book out to you for those who have been waiting, and for those who took advantage of the sale, we'll get you a book ASAP. You'll receive a tracking number as soon as possible. We're working on it, and it's a process, and I appreciate the patience. Make sure you guys take advantage of the sale. I'm trying to keep it up through the weekend. All 5 plus the flash, all 4 books plus the flash drop, $99. Support, take advantage of the sale. And we'll be gone, we'll be down. I want to put it back up because of the emails I got. So make sure you guys take advantage of the sale. Let's get into this video. So, one of the things that really help us understand that they were trying to remember this and that it wasn't these ancient Egyptians is Akhenaten. When we look at Akhenaten, and remember that Akhenaten is credited as being the first monotheist. And Akhenaten looked around and he's seen, once he became Pharaoh or the Nisut, he's seen that, everybody was worshiping so many gods. And the gods, they looked at them in principles of nature, as far as nature, the sun and everything like that. So Akhenaten looks at nature and says to himself, basically, well, there is a oneness to nature. Everything comes out of one. You have a mother and a father, but really you are created inside of one, your mother, and you come out of one, your mother. Your mother births you, she creates you, within. And especially since the ancient Egyptians understood that, woman could create life without a male, then they really looked at, everything as one. So no matter what, you're coming out of the oneness of something. So while everybody was worshiping so many gods, Akhenaten say, you know what? There is one God. It's one God. If there isn't a whole bunch of deities out there, and if there is, they had to come from somewhere. So there is one. So Akhenaten basically gave us the solar disk, or Aten. Now with Aten, the solar disk, we all looked around, ancient Egyptian artifacts. We've seen this stuff everywhere. And you always seen that solar disk. That is Aten. And Akhenaten, which is, he changed his name from Amenhotep IV, which would have been, to Akhenaten, to basically cultivate himself to assume the oneness of that God. So he basically outlawed all the other gods and told everybody, hey, he basically pissed Kemet off and said, he shut down the temples, stopped the worship of all the other gods. And, we got Aten, and they worship Aten, as the one universal God. So now we're talking about the 18th dynasty, the 14th century BCE. So the thing I want you to understand, we're talking about 1353 to like 1336, I think it was, that Akhenaten reigned. So what you have to understand is 18th dynasty is relatively close to the creation of the Bible and everything like that, the creation of the Torah, or what have you, Greek mythology and everything like that. So if in the 18th dynasty, if in the 14th century BCE, they were just then coming into the speculation or the understanding that there could possibly be one God, that alone tells us that there's no way the dynasties before them, any of the dynasties, could have built the Great Pyramids, because there is perfection within the pyramids. I mean, as close to perfection as you can get. The pyramids are not just, the pyramids. They didn't just serve a function I mean, they put in it everything. I mean, I can go on for days of what they did, what they put into it. So basically, all of the knowledge that the ancient Egyptians wrote about, that they're talking about, and that we think is possible, the ancient Egyptians, the ones before the dynasties who actually built the pyramids, actually built proof that this knowledge exists when they built the Great Pyramid. And that is, attributed to the fact that it's perfect. It's almost perfect to true north. The fact that when you measure the circumference and you add it together, basically when you draw a circle around the base and you add the points, the sides together, it equals the speed of light. Stuff like this. I mean, they put into it so much math, geometry, and we're going to get into some of that a little bit in this video. And they put into it the proof, so that if you ever thought that this stuff was just talk, if you really understood what they put into the pyramids when they built it, then you know that these people they accomplished it. Not just for the simple fact that they cut those big stones and everything is set perfectly and everything like that. The sheer weight of it is impossible. It's mind-boggling when you think how they did this stuff. Not only is that crazy and does that prove that these people were powerful, but the deeper meaning is the math, the geometry, which it shuts everything down. Now, we know when Akhenaten died, when Tutankhamun took over, King Tut, his son, when he took over the throne, they basically coerced him to basically reopen the temples, to bring back the worship of all the gods. And, this pleased Kemet. It pleased a lot of people to bring back this worship. So it was really important to people who understood why all the gods should be worshipped and why they must be understood and known, because a lot of people thought Akhenaten just lost his damn mind because some of the people seen let's just say the math, the science, and the worship of these other deities. And you'll understand this as we go along, why they should be worshipped and at least known and understood, because it wasn't just like you was worshiping these beings as being actual beings who existed. There's a deeper meaning behind them. So people who are, let's just say like the secret societies, or the people who was basically, behind the scenes of the Nisut, who was making sure that everything was ran right, they knew the true meaning of these deities. And you would think Akhenaten would know as well, but he wanted this one God, and he wasn't wrong in what he was saying. He just shouldn't outlaw the worship of all the other gods, because they are as important as well. So we know Tut on the throne, and they reopened the temples or what have you. But I want you guys to really understand who these gods are that we talk about. So I'm going to go through almost all the gods of ancient Kemet. I'm pretty sure you guys don't know them all. I'm going to go through most of them, and the really important ones, I'm going to leave some out just for time's sake, because there's a lot of them. Now, some of these guys that I name, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on them, and others I'm just going to go by for time's sake, but we really want to get into most of them in an entire series because they are important. And you're going to start to see some of the things that I talked about in previous videos. You're going to understand why. It's going to make a lot of sense. So now Amon is the king of the gods. He's the god of wind. Usually you see him with the ram's head or the head of a man. And we know Amon combined with Ra gives us Amun-Ra. Next, we have Anubis, who is the god of the dead, the god of embalming, funerals, mourning ceremonies. He has the jackal head. We all know this. A lot of people don't know that Anubis is also the son of Osiris and Nephthys. He is the brother of Horus. We have Aten, who is the sun disk I just talked about. He is an aspect of the god Ra. Next, we have Bes, goddess god Bes. Bes is the dwarf god. He protects babies and pregnant women and protects from scorpions and snake bites. Then we have Geb. Geb is the god of earth, or earth itself, as some people may say. Husband to Nut, father of Set, Osiris, Memphis, and Isis. Next, we have Hathor. Hathor is the goddess of love, usually shown as the cow. Then we have Heket. Heket's the goddess of frogs. We have Horus. Horus is the god of war, god of the sky, falcons. Also the brother of Anubis, son of Osiris and Isis. Isis is the goddess of magic, marriage, healing, and protection. She's the wife and sister to Osiris and mother to Horus. Next we have Khepri, who is the god of the scarab. He is the aspect of Ra in the morning. Next we have Khnum. Khnum is the ram-headed god. He is the aspect of Ra in the evening. Then we have Khonsu. Khonsu is the god of the moon. Next we have Kuk, who is the personification of darkness. Ma'at, who is the goddess of justice, truth, and order, daughter of Ra. Next is Nekbet. Nekbet is the vulture goddess, sister of Wajet. We have Nut. Nut is the goddess of the sky and stars, wife of Geb. Osiris is the god of the underworld and the afterlife, husband and brother to Isis, father of Anubis and Horus, and brother to his mortal enemy, Seth. Then we have Ptah, who is the god of creation. We have Ra. Ra is the god of the sun. Ra was the king of the gods until Osiris took his throne. He is also known as Amun-Ra. Then we have Sekhmet, goddess of lions, fire, and vengeance. She is the alter form of Hathor. A lot of times when you see Sekhmet, you also see Hathor, or you'll see like a cow woman version of Hathor, but it's Sekhmet. Then we have Sheshat, who is the god of writing and measurements. Next we have Seth. Seth is the god of chaos, change, deserts, storms, foreigners. It's weird that they would give a negative god to foreigners. This lets you know how they truly felt about foreigners. Set is the brother of Osiris, husband to Nephthys. Remember, Nephthys and Osiris had Anubis. So a lot of people, depending on, it's another thing you got to understand, depending on what part of Egypt or Kemet that you are in, there are different stories about these mythological gods, different stories. We're going to get into that a little bit here. You got to understand, if you go to Memphis, you know, you have the Memphite text, or the whole Shabaka stone we're going to get into. You got to understand, it's different stories depending on where you at in Kemet, or depending on who you talk to, or what have you. We're going to get into that a little bit. Oh yeah. Another thing about Set, I wrote this down. Set is supposed to have killed Osiris out of jealousy. He is half man and half something else. He's a hybrid. Nobody knows what Seth is mixed with. And a lot of people who look at the depictions, they don't have a clue what it's mixed with. So that's one of those things that's out there. I wanted you guys to understand that. A lot of people, some people will tell you straight up, oh, Seth is mixed with like a dragon, or mixed with something like that, because of the depiction of Set being basically Satan. A lot of people will just say, well, he's probably mixed with a dragon or what have you, because they usually depict him as like a man with wings or what have you when you see drawings. But when you look at the ancient Egyptian depictions of Seth, they can't tell you exactly what he's mixed with, except for the fact that he's mixed. So next we have Shu. Shu is the god of the wind and air. Shu is the father to Geb and Nut, of course. Great-grandfather to Horus and Anubis. Sobek is the god of crocodiles and alligators. Rose Ra Sunboat through the Duat. You're going to understand why these gods, when you look at a lot of the hieroglyphics, why they're always on these boats. You know, you're going to understand in this video what that's about. But Tefnut is the lion goddess of water and fertility. It's the consort of Shu, mother to Geb and Nut. Thoth, or Tahuti, is the scribe of God, god of wisdom, you know, aka Jehudi. Wajet, goddess of protection, sister to Nekbet. And I'm going to stop at W right there. We're just going to leave it at that. There are a few more gods, you know, that I didn't touch on. A handful of them, as a matter of fact. That's not really super important right now. But you'll run into them. We're going to run into them, and I'll explain them then when we get into, you know, everything else. But these are the main gods you really have to understand, especially when we get into the creation story, which we're about to get into now. You realize why these gods were the main gods as far as creation and what their properties basically was. So now when we look at all these Neterus, all these gods, you have to understand it was created to teach about an aspect of nature, creation, a part of reality that exists. This is why they created all of this mythology. All of these teachings was to teach about aspects of nature and reality that, people needed to know. The key to all of it is knowing where it all fits, knowing what it all means. And that's basically what it's all about. Knowing what was the parable behind these guys. Why was they created? Why are these aspects important and where do they fit? That is the key to all this. So in order for you to really understand, why all these guys was created, you need to really know the ancient Egyptian creation story. You need to understand who these guys are. You need to understand the principles. Ma'at. What was this stuff centered around? What was it based off? What did they find that was important about the earth and their society? All of this stuff fits when you start looking at everything. It's so that when you look at certain stuff in ancient Kemet, when you start looking at some hieroglyphics, it's like, huh? It's like, what does it mean? I mean, it might as well be speaking, baby talk to you. It's like, what is it talking about? So when you look at a lot of these depictions, once you understand what things represent, the hieroglyphics start to reveal themselves to you clearly. And I think you're going to get a very good understanding about the time this video is done. When you look at certain hieroglyphics, you're going to understand what it means. You're going to be able to start to begin to understand how to read this stuff. So now let's get into the Egyptian creation story. It's going to sound a little bit weird. And there are different versions to it, where some things are just added and taken away. We're going to actually get into another version of it in this video because there's some things about it you need to understand. But when you get into the ancient Egyptian creation story, you basically have, nothing but darkness. There was chaos and darkness. And then out of the chaos and darkness, which the Egyptians called the waters of noon, out of the waters of noon came Atom or Adam or Atom. This is where they got it from. The atom and Adam in the Bible, it all comes from the waters of noon, where Atom comes out of the waters of noon. So you have Atom coming out of the waters of noon. And Atom, being alone, decided to do something about it. And Atum created Shu, who is the god of the air, and Tefnut, who is the goddess of moisture and of mist. So Atum tasked, and I shouldn't say Atum is formless, has no male form or female form, just Atum. So Atum tasked Shu and Tefnut with the job of basically taking the chaos of the waters of noon and basically doing something with it, making it more stable. So they basically had a job to stabilize what we would consider the cosmos or the universe. And we're talking about something that's so big that it's almost an impossible job. So Shu and Tefnut, they took part of this darkness, this chaos. They created light and darkness. They separated some of the chaos, some of the waters of noon, into light and darkness. So they then put in place Ma'at. Ma'at was there to basically govern, to be the principle of light and darkness. So then they created, Shu and Tefnut created Geb, which is the earth, and Nut, which is the sky. Now, when it was first created, they was together, but because the principles of Ma'at needed them to be separate to function correctly, Shu basically came in between them and separated them. Now, when you look at this hieroglyphic, a lot of you have seen this. It's like a female who was like arched over, a bunch of stuff. It's always a lot of different things that's under Nut or Nut. And this is the sky. That's a representation of the sky. So when you see this depiction, now you understand, okay, this female who is arched over all this stuff is the sky. That is Nut or Nut. And under it, you see Geb or Jeb, however you want to pronounce it, which is basically earth, and it's stuff in the middle. So, Shu came in between them to separate them. And, Nut basically allows the sun, to rise and set, and allows for the rain to occur and everything like that, so that things can grow on the earth or on Geb. So after this stuff is done, and that's the creation of the sky and earth, then you had Shu and Tefnut create Isis, Osiris, Hathor, Seth, Thoth, and Nephthys. So now understand there was still much of this chaos and darkness, this waters of noon that was, undeveloped, untouched. So when Shu and Tefnut went out to basically start developing it, they got lost. And Atum, sent his eye out. Now, one of the things I'll get into in a little bit later, you had Atum who had this eye that can travel the cosmos. It can travel through the waters of noon. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. And they came back. Shu and Tefnut came back with the eye of Atum, and he was so happy. Atum was so happy that he basically wept, and the tears that fell to Jeb basically created us, the human race. Now, of course, this is a mythological creation story, but there's so much more to it when you understand the principles of what these things represent, which is we're going to be getting into this some in this video and in videos to come. But this is important because they made a story so basic that is so highly complicated, so that when you understand what it's talking about, it's like, wow. I mean, how do you make the most complicated story that you understand able to translate to anybody who reads it? Let's put it that way. So when you understand the story in this capacity, and let you understand what they're talking about a little bit more, especially when you know that, Atum is Adam and everything in the universe is created, made of atoms. Now, understand, when the humans was created, of course, they were supposed to abide by the laws of Ma'at, the rules, the principles of Ma'at, and to basically worship the gods, the Netchers or Netarus. So understand, all of this stuff is about energy. The whole metaphor about these gods and everything has to do with energy. This is where they get the whole quantum physics. This is where they get the story of the flower of life. And of course, the creation story in the Bible. All of this stuff comes from out of these stories. So now understand, when you go into the Memphite text, which is basically the Shabaka stones, we find Ptah. This is where Ptah is found at. So now Ptah, who is the creator god, is said to have been the one to have created Atum. So now the Shabaka stone says that when Atum came out of the waters of noon, it was because Ptah spoke him into existence. So Ptah, the creator god, from the waters of noon or from wherever, spoke Atum into existence. And this is how, Atum came to be. So now when we go and we read it, it says, there took shape in the heart. There took shape in the tongue of the form of Atum. For the very great one is Ptah, who gave life to all the gods in their kas, which is basically their energy or soul, through this heart and through this tongue. And for every word of the God came about what the heart devised and the tongue command. So now, again, speaking things into existence. Now we understand, where the Bible stole, let there be light, and speaking things into existence. When you get into like wizardry or witchcraft, it's about spells and speaking things, magical words. Understand where this stuff is coming from. It all comes from here. Ancient Kemet. So Ptah, the creator god, is, and a lot of people get confused with that. As I said before, it depends on where you go. You're going to get different stories. You got to understand how this stuff fits and where it goes. So in the Memphite text, which comes from Memphis, and the Shabaka stones, which the Shabaka stones is basically the Memphite text that when it was found was so worm eaten, like it was supposed to be like damn near destroyed, that the Sut Shabaka basically had it translated and put into stone on the Shabaka stone. It's named after him. So at some point, somebody used the stone for something else. And this is where you see the square and the lines in it that's not supposed to be there. So we basically can't read the entire text and what it says. There's stories on the top and on each sides of it that we can make out, but it's more to it. But it's basically destroyed because of, the person who did this to it. So, that little sun looking thing or the square in the middle, I forget exactly what they was doing. It's not supposed to be there. But, understand, depending on where you are at in Kemet, the stories are different. But, most of them is going to the same principles that the ancients wanted you to understand. Now, according to the Memphite theology, which is the theology of Memphis, under the rulership of Shabaka, and the Memphite texts, you have Ptah being the creator god. Now, Memphis became the capital of Kemet, the capital of Egypt. So now when you go into the Memphite text, when you look at Ptah being the creator god, it talks about Ptah creating the Ogdoad. And the Ogdoad is basically like the elements or the components that make up the reality that created our reality, or make up the water waves of noon, or the waters of noon I just talked about, the darkness, the chaos. What made that stuff up? This is the Ogdoad. And you see the depictions of Ptah on the potter's wheel creating the egg, and from the egg, the Ogdoad, which Ogdoad basically means the 8, is we get these components that made up the reality that created our reality. It's really deep stuff. So now, what are these 8 things? Now, understand these 8 things, as I talked about in part 1, our reality has a dual nature. Well, so does the reality that created our reality. There's a dual nature to reality, and that's what the Ogdoad is about. So now when you look at the Ogdoad, we have Nun and Nunet. We have Ha and Hahet, Ka and Kaket, Amon and Amenet. So these very funny sounding names are very powerful things in the Memphite theology, and they are basically what the components are that created the reality that created our reality, or we could just call it space or the universe, that darkness that's out there that we can't see, that we have, so many questions about. This is what this stuff is made of. So when we look at Nun and Nunet, that is the waters or the abyss, the watery abyss. We have Ha and Hahet, which basically represents the infinite, the finite and the infinite, the endless and the end. We have Ka and Kaket, which basically represents the light and darkness. So Ka and Kaket represents the light and the darkness. Then we have Amon and Amenet, which basically represents the seen and the unseen. So when you think about the universe out there, when we think about space and what that stuff, really represents. When you think about the light and darkness, in space, we have darkness and we have stars. We have little peaks of light. So also space is supposed to be infinite, but we know it's only a certain point that we can go to. So it's not infinite to us, in this material form, but it's infinite in reality. And then, of course, we have the seen and unseen. Now, some things that we cannot see with human eyes, but they are there, they exist. And then the whole abyss or the chaos is, the chaos that is space. The waters, I'm going to explain later what the water waves of Nun represent. I'm going to get into that later. But when you look at these components, they basically make up what we consider space. The reality that created our reality. This is how they looked at it, the ancient Egyptians. So we have Nun and Nunet, Ha and Hahet, Ka and Kaket, Amon and Amenet. I could be pronouncing them wrong. I could be pronouncing them right, but this is basically what they are and the principles that they represent. Water, chaos, endlessness, infinite and the finite, light and darkness, and of course the seen and unseen. So these are very important principles that were created according to the Memphite theology by Ptah, who basically is the one, you might as well say. This is why they stole them and made an Oscar out of them, because it's very important. We talk about a very powerful principle here. Ptah, the creator god, and it's messed up. We only got that one little teeny statue of Ptah. You would think it would be so much more of him. But this is like really deep knowledge. And a lot of people don't know if this knowledge was only taught in like the mystery schools about who these beings are, or if, everybody was taught to them, was taught about this stuff. But the principles, when you get into the deepness of this stuff and how deep it goes, you'll understand why it would have been probably hard for some people to understand. And they probably made it way more easier for people who were in the advanced schools or who were becoming like the priest and everything like that. And we don't know exactly how they was taught and what information that they received. But when you get into this stuff, when you get into the Mythite theology, when you start getting into stuff that is this deep, people, it don't really get too much deeper than the reality that created our reality. And you start thinking about somebody who actually had the mindset to give it a name and ascribe to it principles. If you had to go and name what this stuff is, you would be sitting there all day. But they came up with basic principles that describe the reality or the nothingness, whatever you want to call it, the darkness, the void, or whatever that created everything. And they call it the water waves of Nun, and Ptah was the creator god of it all. So now the Ogdoad, again, the Ogdoad would basically be what existed before space. Before, there was even space. Think about that. Before time, before the planets, before the universe, Ptah created the Ogdoad. And the components that make up space, not only did the ancient Egyptians give them names, but these things are also represented by, wait for it, serpents and frogs, snakes and frogs. So the Nun, Nunet, Ha-Ha-Het, Ka-Ka-Ket, Amon and Amunet are represented by frogs and serpents, frogs and snakes. So this is going to help you understand a lot more when you look at it, when you start looking at the overall picture. So remember, when you walk into the temple of Hathor and you look up, what do you see? You see them, the snakes, the frogs, and people who are trying to understand, what is this stuff about? What is the serpents about? Oh, it gets much more deeper, people. So when you go back to Saturn's sake, when I was talking about the stuff, you can understand now. It's deep. It's going to get a lot more deeper. So when you go into the temple of Hathor, when you start looking at the hieroglyphics and you see this stuff on the ceiling, and you understand now, why is this stuff on the ceiling? Because it's talking about space. Look at the waves at the bottom right there. Now you understand the waves. Now you understand when you look on the ceiling, you see these waves. You see people on boats. See, if you don't have this knowledge, then you can look at this stuff and you won't know what the hell it's talking about. Why the hell are they putting people in boats, in the sky, on the ceiling? What are snakes and frogs doing here? Now you understand what they represent. You see the stars while they're on the boat. You can look at these depictions and you can understand how the Europeans got them completely wrong.